The FTX saga continues. Sam Bankman-Fried was released on a $250 million bond in order to stay at his parents' house in California. Following his first appearance in New York federal court, SBF has become the poster child for the recent crypto collapse. But should government regulators like the SEC share the blame? Former SEC senior trial counselor Howard A. Fischer joins us now. And Howard, thank you for joining us here. My
pleasure.
What's your assessment of the situation? It's been a show, so to speak, so far, but now we have witnesses, we have extraditions. How do you see this playing out?
Well, that's a good question. I think it's important to note that in announcing the plea bargains of Ellison and Wang, as well as the charges against SBF, the U.S. attorney issued a warning to anyone else involved in the case, involved in Alameda, involved in FTX, saying, you better come forward now. We're happy to cooperate with you, but we're coming after you. We're going to get you. Now is your best chance. So I think what we're going to likely see is a bunch of other players coming out of the woodwork, a bunch of other charges being filed, and not just by the U.S. Attorney's Office, but by the CFTC as well as the SEC as well.
Kudos for the DOJ, the STNY, getting cooperating witnesses and moving at lightning speed. But as you know, a lot of fingers have been pointed at the SEC, including by Congressman Tom Emmer. He says Gary Gensler must testify before Congress. He tweeted that FTX's collapse is not a crypto failure. It's a CFI, Gary Gensler, SBF situation. How responsible is Gary Gensler for, as some would say, being asleep at the wheel during all of this?
Yeah, it's sort of ironic that Representative Emmer is blaming the SEC when earlier this year, if you remember, Emmer was the lead signatory on a letter by several congressmen to the SEC, yelling at them essentially for exceeding their mandate by, among other things, seeking information from FTX. Emmer is the co-chair, I believe, of what's known as the Blockchain Caucus, and he has been very vocal that government should leave crypto, should leave the digital asset space alone, and let entrepreneurship and let innovation thrive without the, as he would put it, regulatory touch of regulation. So it is somewhat opportunistic for Emmer, who has been calling for the SEC to step back, to now come forward and say, oh, no, the problem is the SEC hasn't been aggressive enough.
That's fair. Should Gensler, though, testify before Congress, is there some type of regulation that could have prevented this?
Yeah, no, look, I think that there has been long a call for regulation of the crypto space, and there's, even in the face of efforts by those such as Emmer to pull back on government regulation, and it's not just an SEC issue. I mean, as you know, I'm sure, the SEC has been going after crypto assets. It has put forth several very aggressive lawsuits arguing that certain assets like Ripple, like LBRY, are in fact securities and have to be regulated. But it's not just an SEC issue. It's also a banking issue. There's now a question, given what we've seen with FTX, with Celsius, with other exchanges, there is an issue as to how crypto assets of customers are to be treated at an exchange. Should they be segregated? Should they be insured? Should there be something like some kind of depository scheme like we have for normal banking? Do we need a kind of Glass-Steagall for crypto, where customer-facing operations have to be completely divorced from proprietary trading? I think if we had something like that in effect, we probably wouldn't have seen the scope of the scandal that we're seeing at FTX.
We've been talking about a lot about the SEC, but there's also the CFTC, the Commodity Futures Trading Commission. Yeah. In fact, two former commissioners made it onto the FTX board, Mark Wetjen and also Jill Summers. And I haven't seen as much written about the CFTC influence on FTX. And in fact, Sam Bankman-Fried was lobbying the CFTC to allow derivatives trading to, I guess, new futures instruments to be traded by FTX. And I got to say, I'm glad these didn't come to fruition here, because that could have been an absolute nightmare. I'm just wondering what the CFTC's complicity in this is, if you see any.
I don't think complicity is the right word here, but you do point to an important issue, and that is if we are going to regulate the cryptocurrency space, who's going to regulate it? Is it going to be the CFTC? Is it going to be the SEC? Is it going to be another organization created just in the crypto world? And historically, the CFTC has not been funded as well as the SEC. It has been less active, less aggressive. So traditionally, if you want the approval of regulation, but you don't want to be too closely regulated, you would try to get regulated by the CFTC, not the SEC, especially since, as we've seen now with Chairman Gensler, the SEC can be very aggressive, and you don't see that level of aggression and expansion of authority with the CFTC. And I think that's why a lot of people, Sam Bankman-Fried among them, have long sought, if it is going to be a regulated space, to have the CFTC be the regulator.
It's going to be an interesting road. Please come back and join us when we get to this trial. Thank you, former SEC Senior Trial Counsel Howard Fischer. Good to see you, sir.